In this blood-soaked universe, war is not the only path. A decisive decision will change everything, as Admiral Kang, the leader of the Hegemony, stands at the crossroads of destruction and hope. A small human warship, the HSS Retribution, brings a message that the entire Empire must hear. Peace is not a choice. It is a matter of survival. With one wrong move, everything could collapse. But does the Hegemony have the strength to change, or will it continue fighting at too great a cost? Join me on a journey into a war where no one can predict the outcome, where hope and despair collide. Subscribe now and don't miss this journey. Peace or destruction. The planet Kirona was sinking into the murky light of twilight, as war relentlessly threatened the survival of all life. Earth, a small planet in the vast universe, was a precious gem now under attack by a colossal cosmic force, the Hegemony. Their army was making ceaseless advances, and planets like Kirona were just dots on the cosmic map that they intended to seize. Earth was no longer a safe haven, but rather the primary target in this unforgiving war. Admiral Kang stood on the bridge of his flagship, his cold eyes fixed on the unfolding events. The brutal assaults had decimated nearly everything, and the weapons of the Hegemony had become a nightmare not just for humanity, but for other civilizations across the universe. Kang was a symbol of power, but in his eyes, fatigue had begun to creep into every decision. The soldiers, the warriors under his command, had fought relentlessly, but now not every victory made him feel proud. Each triumph came with losses that could not be measured. The cost of war was not just the material damage, but the loss of values, the things he once held dear. Kang stood before the massive screen, staring at the intelligence data constantly updating. The Hegemony's command systems had placed everything into a final attack-a-decisive blow to the planet Kirona, where humanity would face the risk of extinction. Their warships had been mobilized, and a massive army was in place, ready to strike. But just as the brutal decisions were being made, an unexpected message appeared on Kang's combat screen. A human warship is entering our space. The cold message transmitted, instantly filling the command room with a suffocating atmosphere. It was almost unbelievable. A single human ship, daring to enter the Hegemony's territory. A force so mighty, full of power and brutality. Kang stared at the screen, a rising sense of doubt taking hold. This couldn't possibly be a human warship. They couldn't possibly send just one warship here, facing such an overwhelming army. Such an attack couldn't happen with just a single ship. What was going on here? Was it a trap? A plot that humanity was hiding? Or was it really the madness of a group of pilots gone insane? A second later, the message continued. HSS Retribution requests negotiations with the Hegemony Council. The name was one Kang couldn't forget. HSS Retribution. A warship, but with a name that evoked a powerful challenge. How could humanity risk this? Kang glanced at the screen, where the image of Captain Park appeared. She was just a female commander, but that face radiated a terrifying calmness, like a warrior forged in the fires of war. This can't be, Kang thought, but within him, a sense of unease began to rise. Why had they chosen this path? Was this the strategy that humanity had long prepared? A strategy Kang couldn't yet decipher? Meanwhile, the generals around Kang began to murmur. Commander Lee, one of Kang's most trusted commanders, stood and began to report, "The human ship shows no sign of a large fleet, just a single ship. However, there are no indications it is preparing for an attack." A silence fell over the command room. "Could they be testing us?" Kang asked, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the screen, where Captain Park's image still remained. She didn't appear afraid, only calm and confident, a demeanor Kang had never encountered in any human. Her voice rang out, "I am Captain Park of the HSS Retribution. I request an official negotiation with the Hegemony Council." That calmness made the atmosphere in the command room even more tense. Kang knew this was not just any typical battle. This was a negotiation between life and death, between brutality and hope. Humanity seemed to be playing a game that the Hegemony had never prepared for. These humans not only had resilience, but they possessed an unshakable confidence. All Kang could do now was order Commander Lee to prepare eavesdropping devices and monitor the movements of the Retribution ship closely. Whether this was a trap or an actual negotiation, he had to know exactly what humanity was hiding. The hours to come would determine the course of this war. Humanity had sent a single warship, but were they risking something far beyond the imagination of the Hegemony? The answer would soon be revealed in this dramatic negotiation. The large screen in the command room of the Hegemony flagship lit up brightly as Captain Park appeared. For the first time, Admiral Kang was forced to face a strategy from humanity that was completely unpredictable. The image of Captain Park, cold and composed, made the atmosphere in the command room tense, like a stretched bowstring. At this moment, there was no more doubt or hesitation, only one truth: humanity had truly arrived, and they had not come to surrender. Kang's face remained stern, his eyes never leaving the screen. This young human commander dared to request negotiations instead of fighting. How could one single ship, without any support, without any fleet, venture into the space of the Hegemony and demand a negotiation with the Hegemony Council? The human ship is alone, with no signs of support, and all the data indicates they have no intention of attacking, Commander Lee reported, her voice tinged with anxiety. Lee had been with Kang for a long time, and for the first time, she felt unease in her heart. What was happening? What plan did humanity have? Kang did not respond, his eyes unwavering. Captain Park continued to look at him through the screen, her calmness striking him like a punch in the face. There was no fear, no confusion. In fact, there was a cold light in her gaze, as if she was ready for whatever was about to happen. This did not sit well with Kang. Her voice echoed once more, without the slightest tremor. I am Captain Park, of the HSS Retribution. I request negotiations with the Hegemony Council. One ship, but we bring a message that cannot be ignored. This war will not end without an agreement. Her words rang like thunder across the cold expanse of space, but also carried the weight of undeniable truth. We did not come here to wage war. We came to protect the survival of humanity, she continued. Her words pierced Kang's heart. Not a grand fleet, but just one ship, and they were here to discuss peace? How could this be? This was the strategy humanity had kept hidden for so long. Not direct confrontation, but negotiation. Kang furrowed his brow, his suspicion growing with every passing second. Humanity only has one warship, and you're asking for negotiations? This is madness. You can't stand up to us, and yet you come to discuss peace? Kang's voice was cold, but the unease was still evident. Captain Park did not respond immediately, instead calmly observing Kang. She knew that he would not believe her right away, but it was her confidence and determination that would convince him. I don't expect you to believe what I say right away, but I will show you our true strength. She paused for a moment, then continued. This is not a war we desire. We only want to protect what's left of us. Meanwhile, the generals of the Hegemony sat motionless, concern beginning to appear in their expressions. They were all too familiar with reckless and dangerous strategies, but this was different. A single ship with nothing to protect it except the will of humanity. Could this be a trap? Kang decided not to let Captain Park distract him any further. First, he said, humanity cannot negotiate with us. You do not have the power to command an empire like the Hegemony. You have one ship. We have an entire fleet. Though his words were powerful, Kang could not suppress the growing feeling of worry. Something was wrong. I know you think that, Captain Park replied, her eyes locked on the screen. But you are wrong. We didn't come here to spill blood needlessly. What we bring is not weapons, but the truth. The truth about a war that, if it continues, will only lead to destruction for both sides. You will not win if we don't have the chance to live. Kang couldn't help but feel a moment of hesitation, but he quickly regained his composure. So what will you do? Is this really just one ship and an invitation for negotiation? Is that all? That's not all, Captain Park said, then reached for a small device on the table. She pressed a button, and immediately, a hologram appeared. It showed an image of a planet devastated by an unknown force. "We have technology that you could never imagine. This is Project Sunburst, and this is the truth you must face." Kang couldn't believe his eyes. The image before him seemed impossible, but the technical data on the control panel showed that this was an undeniable reality. Project Sunburst was a technology that could change everything, a weapon Kang could not fully comprehend. One ship, and they could destroy a planet in mere seconds? Kang felt the air in the command room suddenly grow thick. He took a deep breath, trying to suppress the rising anger inside him. "You could destroy us, but do you have the strength to fight when we retaliate?" Kang growled. "No need," Park replied simply. "Peace is the only option. If you refuse, we will not stop fighting, and you will not be able to stop us." The confrontation between the two, between one who held power and one who carried hope, had begun. But what would be the result? An agreement or a war without end? In Kang's heart, doubt still lingered, but he knew that this was the moment when everything would have to be decided. The command room of the Hegemony was plunged into a tense silence after Captain Park had left. Her words still echoed in Admiral Kang's mind. "Peace is the only option. If you refuse, we will not stop fighting. And you will not be able to stop us." These were not threats, but a firm declaration, a statement of the power humanity now possessed. It made Kang reconsider the strategy he had built over the years. Kang stood before the large screen, watching the image of the HSS Retribution returning to humanity's space, with clear signs of a calm that seemed almost unnatural. A small ship, yet it brought a terrifying power that Kang could not have imagined. The devices on the Retribution indicated that they had activated Project Sunburst, capable of destroying an entire planet in mere seconds. Meanwhile, Kang's advisory team and officers began discussing possible responses. Commander Lee, always the practical one, spoke up. "We cannot ignore this technology. A tiny warship capable of destroying a planet? If we don't react immediately, humanity might use it to obliterate our key worlds." Her voice was hoarse, filled with concern. Kang remained still, his cold eyes fixed on the cosmic map. He understood that the Hegemony was at a dangerous crossroads. If they did not act swiftly, everything they had built could collapse in a single moment. However, he also knew that simply responding with force would lead to an endless war, and humanity would not be the one to suffer the most. They had too many unexpected strategies. "Don't let emotions dictate our decisions," Kang interrupted the discussion. "I want all of you to carefully analyze Project Sunburst. Any response must be meticulously calculated. We will not let them drag us into a war we cannot win." Minutes passed like hours. Kang's officers and commanders kept analyzing the data, searching for any holes in humanity's strategy. Yet, all possibilities pointed to one thing. Captain Park and the HSS Retribution were not a trap, but an invisible strike, one that could not have been predicted. Amidst the tension, a sudden signal appeared on the screen. Abnormal activity detected near the planet Kirona. This was information Kang could not ignore. Kirona was not only a critical strategic target in the war, but also the location where the Hegemony's strategic forces were concentrated. If Project Sunburst could indeed cause the devastation they feared, this planet might soon become the next victim of humanity. "All forces to battle positions," Kang ordered. "Prepare to attack if any signs of invasion occur." The Hegemony warships immediately transitioned into battle-ready status. The ships lined up and moved into orbit around Corona. Kang knew this was the moment when everything could change, and this decision would be the turning point in the war. Humanity was not only fighting for survival, but might now possess a weapon that could alter the balance of the entire universe. But could the Hegemony defeat this power with just their mighty warships? Or had humanity figured out their weaknesses and would use silence to win? The Hegemony warships began to accelerate, heading toward the area around Kirona. But everything changed when an unusual signal appeared from one of the Hegemony's ships on the screen. "The human ship has appeared again. There is a small vessel with no sign of any fleet." All eyes were focused on the screen. This was an unexpected situation. Captain Park had really come with just a small warship. Kang froze. Part of him wanted to give up, to end the war, but another part urged him to continue, to fight until the end. The sense of threat from humanity made it impossible for him to turn a blind eye to the danger that was drawing nearer. With humanity's single ship still boldly crossing the vast expanse of space, the first signals from Project Sunburst became clearer than ever. Kirona was facing the risk of being completely destroyed if the Hegemony did not respond in time. Humanity's sophisticated tactics were beginning to emerge. At this point, Kang's officers began to realize that Project Sunburst might not just be a threat to a single planet, but rather a strategy to force the Hegemony to yield. Ultimately, the truth became clear. This war was not just about military strength, but about the understanding between civilizations. Kang stood up, his face hardened with unwavering determination. Everything has changed. There's no turning back. That was his declaration of war, not only against humanity but also against the fear inside himself. A new war awaited, not to destroy the enemy, but to find the only solution that the Hegemony had never anticipated: negotiation. All the commanders exchanged glances. Would victory truly belong to them, or would sacrifice lead them to an irreparable end? The cost of war is not only measured in blood but also in what is lost within the soul of each individual. Facing an unavoidable decision, Admiral Kang looked back at the path the Hegemony had traveled. Each victory, each battle, had left deep wounds in his heart, and the longer he fought, the more he felt the changes within himself. The cost of power was too high, and now he had to answer for everything he had caused. That day, Kirona was no longer a planet full of hope, but one of the vital targets of the Hegemony. Giant warships surrounded this planet, and in Kang's mind, there was no longer any hesitation. The decision had been made, and he had ordered the attack. But deep within him, a sense of anxiety rose. Was there truly a victory to be had in this war? As the battle raged on, Captain Park's words continued to echo in his mind. "We are not here to wage war, but to protect life." These words were not just a declaration of an ideal, but a reminder of the human values the Hegemony had lost. Could humanity truly be wrong for not wanting to continue the war? Or was it the Hegemony that was insane in its ambition? Commander Lee entered the command room, her face marked with clear concern. "We cannot destroy this planet any further," she said, her voice lowering almost to a plea. "The data from the warships shows that humanity's technology could create wounds that cannot be healed, not just for Corona, but for the Hegemony as well." She paused, her anxious gaze fixed on Kang. "If we continue, we will not just lose this war, we will lose everything." Kang did not respond immediately. He stood still, his eyes still locked on the screen, where Captain Park's image remained. She was not just a warrior, she was someone carrying the power of an ideal. The decisions she made were not only for her people, but for something greater: the protection of humanity. She did not need to win. She needed to show that war was not the only path. Another message appeared on the screen. "We can stop, but do you have the courage to do so?" This was humanity's final declaration of war, a challenge that Kang could not ignore. In that moment, Admiral Kang recalled the wars of the past. How many people had sacrificed their lives for the greatness of the Hegemony? How many planets had been destroyed just to protect power? How many lives had endured suffering because of his decisions and those of his predecessors? And now, he was standing at the crossroads, between continuing the fight to preserve power or giving it all up to protect the fundamental values of humanity. "We cannot continue like this," Lee said, her voice filled with concern. "We have gone too far. If we don't change, we will not be able to save ourselves. The Hegemony cannot win by destroying everything. This brutality will only lead to endless destruction." Kang remained silent, but inside him, a new war was beginning. The truth he had long avoided was now becoming clear. Humanity had not come to fight with force. They had come to fight with ideals. This made him rethink his strategy. A victory could not be built on senseless sacrifice. If the Hegemony continued this war, The very power he protected could be lost forever. But war is a beast not easily stopped. The decisions Kang had made before had led to this brutality, and now he had to face the consequences. Corona might not remain a planet anymore if he did not stop. But if he stopped, would the Hegemony still have the power to maintain dominance? Was this sacrifice the right step, or would it lead to the final downfall of the Hegemony? Kang turned to Commander Lee, his gaze full of resolve. The order to attack stands. We will not stop until humanity realizes that war will never be the only way. Lee looked at him with surprise. She had known the war would not end easily, but she had not expected Kang to make this decision. So, what will we do next? We will prepare to fight, but we must also find a way to negotiate, Kang said, his voice firm yet tinged with uncertainty. Humanity didn't come here to attack. They came to force us to look at ourselves. These words were not only a declaration of war, but also a deep recognition of what was happening. The Hegemony would have to face an inevitable change. But the cost of war had come, and Kang understood that there were things that power could not conquer. That was humanity's compassion. Arvanjar. The battle was not only being fought on the front lines. Every step Admiral Kang took now felt like a confrontation with himself. More than ever, he realized that the power Hegemony had built over thousands of years could not be easily maintained if it was based solely on brutality and military force. Humanity had proven that true strength did not lie in armies but in the resilience of ideals. In the dimly lit command room of the Hegemony flagship, the flickering lights reflected off Kang's weary face. An emergency meeting had been called immediately after he ordered the advance to Kirona, where his decision could change the course of the war. But in these moments, he was no longer only concerned with victory. Kang began to reflect on all the decisions he had made. Commander Lee entered the room, her eyes showing clear signs of tension. Admiral, our forces are ready. However, I think we need to rethink our next move. Humanity has pushed us to this brink, but not everything can be solved with military power. She looked at him, her eyes sharp, as if trying to convey something she could no longer hold back. Kang looked at her, his internal tension rising. The air in the room felt suffocating, heavy. What's the next step? We can't stop now. We've invested too much into this war. Humanity wants peace, but they've brought with them weapons of mass destruction. I can't let them win. His voice was firm, but inside, an anxiety he couldn't hide began to grow. But if we continue, Lee replied, we won't just lose the war, we'll lose everything. This brutality has gone too far. Don't let power blind us. She paused, looking directly into Kang's eyes. We once believed military strength was everything. But humanity has shown us that victory is not only in force, but in ideals, in sacrifice, and in the belief in peace. Kang could not deny that. He had once believed that Hegemony's strength would be humanity's most steadfast protector. But in the months of war, he had begun to realize that the very brutality he had used to safeguard everything was destroying what he was trying to protect. These wars were not just about victory, they were about what he was willing to sacrifice. This choice was not easy. Hegemony had gone through countless wars, defeated many enemies. But now, before an adversary like humanity, Kang felt something very different. I once thought I could control everything, Kang muttered, his gaze distant as he looked out the window. But humanity has taught us a painful lesson. Not everything can be controlled with power. As Kang pondered, his officers and commanders continued to argue. Those who favored an aggressive approach were unwilling to give up. We cannot let them dethrone us, one of the commanders shouted. We can defeat them if we don't stop now. But within Kang, a strong sense of hesitation arose, the feeling that continuing to fight was not the only way forward. While the Hegemony prepared for a new battle, Captain Park, on the other side of the war, had already prepared herself for whatever might come. Though she was the leader of the HSS Retribution, she did not view this war as a struggle for power, but as a fight to protect humanitarian values. We are not here to destroy you, she said, but her eyes conveyed the resolve of someone ready to sacrifice. We are here to stop a senseless war. And if it takes sacrifice, we will do it to save what's left. Kang could not ignore the truth in her words. Captain Park's calmness and her words forced him to face a reality he could no longer avoid. No matter how strong power was, it could not decide everything. And if this war continued, the Hegemony would pay an unbearably high price. Kang left the command room, his steps heavy. It was time for him to make the final decision. This decision would not only affect the survival of the Hegemony, but the future of all civilizations. In those moments, he realized that a path to peace might be harder, but it was the only path that could ensure the survival of everyone. This is not about victory, but about protecting what's left of humanity, Kang thought to himself. Kang turned back, his gaze no longer one of the cold determination of a warrior, but one of awareness of the cost of power. "I will not let this war continue," he declared. "Humanity has shown us that peace is the only option." Kang was no longer Admiral Kang of the Hegemony. He was a leader who had come to understand that sacrifice for ideals, for peace, was the right path. But would this decision be enough to change the course of the war? And would Hegemony be able to accept such a turning point? The decisions in war are not solely dependent on military strength, but also on courage and the ability to make sacrifices. When Admiral Kang decided to halt the attack on Kirona, he was not only confronting the failure of a mighty empire, but also facing the deep doubts within himself. The brutality of war seemed to have pushed him into a dark corner of irreversible choices. But no one could have predicted that this very move would become the turning point in the war. Kirona, now, was no longer a battleground of brutal clashes. This planet, though threatened by Project Sunburst, still held some value that the Hegemony had not yet recognized: hope. Captain Park did not come here to destroy, but to prove that war was not the only path. When she spoke for the last time, the determination in her voice not only made Kang feel the strength of humanity's ideals, but also propelled him to realize that peace might be the only way for both humanity and the Hegemony to coexist. "I know you're hesitating, but war will never bring lasting stability. Humanity has not come to conquer, we only came to survive." Captain Park's words echoed again in Kang's mind, like a reminder of what was at stake. He was no longer just a warrior. Kang had slowly come to understand that in this war, humanity's survival was not solely determined by powerful weapons or an overwhelming fleet, but by the values they protected. The decision to stop the war seemed to have completely shifted the momentum of the conflict. Kang could not help but wonder, in those tense moments, whether he had made the right choice. His empire, the Hegemony, was no longer the strongest in the universe, but one that had to question its own purpose for existence. Corona, though not destroyed, had become a symbol of an alternate pathon that the Hegemony had missed. A bell chimed. Commander Lee entered the command room with a serious expression. "Admiral, we've received a message from the HSS Retribution. They request an official negotiation with the Hegemony Council." "This could be an opportunity for us to find a solution," she said, her eyes fixed on Kang, her worry unhidden. "I don't think we can afford to miss this opportunity." Kang looked at the screen, where Captain Park's image appeared once more. This time, there were no threats or unreasonable demands. Just the calm of a person on a mission, someone willing to sacrifice everything for a peaceful future. The tension from before had lessened somewhat, but not because he no longer sensed the danger. It was because he realized that everything could change if humanity could see a path other than war. Humanity may never surrender, Kang thought to himself. But perhaps it is us who need to change. This thought wasn't just a passing idea in his head, but a profound realization about the price he had paid over the years. The power of the hegemony, no matter how great, could not change the reality that war always leaves scars that can never be healed. Whoever won, war only brought destruction. The tension in the command room grew as reports came in from hegemony warships about changes from humanity's side. They were not continuing the war, but had begun taking steps of goodwill, ready to engage in serious discussions. This made Kang realize something he had never considered before. The hegemony could no longer impose dominance through military force. An hour later, in the official conference room of the Hegemony, Captain Park stood before Kang. Her gaze had no arrogance or challenge, only an unshakable resolve. "Admiral Kang, we are ready for this negotiation. Humanity does not seek war. We only seek a peaceful future. It's time for us to stop arguing and start acting." Kang looked at her, the weariness in his eyes no longer just that of a tired warrior, but that of a leader confronting the truth. "I cannot guarantee that we will end this war with peace," he said, "but I am willing to listen to what you have to offer." The official negotiations began, not with threats, but with practical agreements. Kang realized that the hegemony also needed to change in order to survive in a universe where strength did not only come from armies, but also from understanding and sacrifice. Whether this war ended with peace or not, Kang understood that it had helped him realize that every decision, no matter how difficult, could open a door to a different future. Certainly, not everything would change immediately, but Kang knew that this was the most important turning point in this war. It was time for him and all of those under his command to choose a path they had never considered before: peace. The negotiations between Captain Park and Admiral Kang lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Every minute, every word they exchanged felt like an arrow aimed straight at the heart of the decisions made throughout the war. Kang knew that this was the final turning point, not only for the hegemony but for the entire universe. But his choice was not an easy one, for deep inside the heart of a warrior, there was still a sense of victory and pride. Kirona, the planet that had become a symbol of destruction and sacrifice, the devastation that the hegemony had caused, had not only eroded humanity's existence but also that of the hegemony itself. But now, Captain Park was not merely coming to demand peace. She had proven that ideals, not military power, were the things that could win this war. Humanity was not only fighting to survive, they were fighting to preserve their dignity. The picture of the hegemony was slowly changing, and Kang was no longer just a general standing before a mighty army. He was a man standing at a crossroads. He knew that continuing the war would only bring endless destruction. But could a turning point of peace be strong enough to alter the course of the universe? What he could not have anticipated was that humanity, with just one ship, could make the hegemony reconsider its very nature. After 3 days of intense discussions, the negotiations ended, but no official agreement was signed immediately. Everything was still in the process of negotiation. Captain Park returned to the HSS Retribution, and Kang returned to his command room. However, within each of them, something had changed. Commander Lee entered Kang's command room, her face as serious as ever. "Admiral, we've received a message from the HSS Retribution. They have informed us that if we do not reach a formal agreement within 48 hours, they will not hesitate to deploy the full power of Project Sunburst. This means they will not just destroy Corona, but they will target key planets of the hegemony." Kang slowly closed his eyes, as if trying to avoid facing the truth she had just presented. He had once thought that humanity would never take it this far, but now that warning felt like an official declaration of war. If the hegemony did not yield, everything would be destroyed. Captain Park and the HSS Retribution had shown him that strength did not lie in military power, but in the determination to protect ideals. "We have time," Kang said, his voice cold but tired. "But if we don't find a solution, everything will collapse. It's time for humanity to pay the price for their determination." But in that moment, a strange feeling arose within him. He no longer wanted to win through war. He had grown too weary of the destruction. If the hegemony continued, could he save what was left? "Admiral, is it possible to end this war?" Lee asked, her eyes full of doubt. "We could come to an agreement, but if we keep fighting, we will lose everything." Kang was silent. He did not answer immediately. The moments stretched on endlessly. Too many critical decisions had been made, and too many lives had been sacrificed. But now he had to face the truth that it was not weapons or armies that mattered. but humanity's courage and sacrifice that had made him reconsider everything the Hegemony had done. "We will seek a way to negotiate," Kang finally decided. "Humanity has taught us a lesson. We cannot continue war forever." Orders were issued immediately. Kang decided to meet with Captain Park again, but this time it was not to continue the tense negotiations. Instead, he would discuss a long-term solution that could allow both sides to survive without continuing the war. Captain Park was waiting in the conference room, her eyes filled with determination but also hope. When Kang entered, there were no threats, no accusations, only a quiet understanding. Finally, Park spoke. "I know you don't want war, Admiral. We don't want war. We can change everything if we choose the right path. The cost we have paid has been too great." Kang sighed, sitting down opposite her. "I understand now, Captain. To have peace, we will have to change. Our empire cannot continue like this." This time, no one needed to ask for a fight. Not because the Hegemony was weaker, but because both sides had understood that true strength did not lie in military dominance, but in the ability to accept change and sacrifice for a peaceful future. The negotiations concluded not with a clear victory, but with a temporary agreement. The Hegemony and humanity would work together to rebuild a new world, one where there was no war, no senseless destruction. This was the first step on the long road ahead. Kang stood up, his gaze meeting Captain Park's. "Perhaps this war truly has ended, and we are just beginning to understand each other." Never before had a victory brought so much hope.